You've heard that right. That's a quote from a major U.S. senator. And honestly, it really captures the feeling in Washington right now. The relationship between the U.S. and China, it's not just another issue. For them, it is the single challenge that's going to define this century.
So how in the world did we get here? Well, that's what we're going to unpack. We're going to break down the anatomy of this rivalry, from the headline-grabbing trade wars all the way down to the clashing economic systems at its very core.
And listen, don't for a second think this is just about politicians. One of the most powerful AI CEOs in Silicon Valley just came right out and said it. The goal is to use technology to make sure we live in a unipolar world, one that's led by the US and, of course, its companies. Okay, let's dive in. To really get what this new Cold War is all about, we've got to peel back the layers. We'll start on the surface with the obvious stuff, the trade and tech wars. And then we're going to dig way deeper into the radically different economic engine that's been powering China's rise. So, the most obvious battleground, of course, has been the trade war. It kicked off under one president, got continued and even beefed up by the next, and now, after a short truce, it looks like it's about to heat up all over again. The big takeaway here? This isn't just some temporary disagreement. It's a long-term policy that both parties in the US are on board with. But it's about so much more than just tariffs. This is a technology war. And US officials have been, shockingly open about their goal to actively and intentionally slow down China's tech development, especially when it comes to the absolute game changer that is artificial intelligence. And to win that tech war, Washington is trying to build a new team, a coalition they're calling Pax Silica. The goal is, well, it's huge. They want to build an entirely new global supply chain for all the minerals that make our modern world run, everything from AI chips to EV batteries, and to do it by cutting China out of the picture completely. So we've got a trade war and a tech war. But why? What's really driving all of this? To get the real answer, you have to look past the symptoms and get to the root cause. And that means we have to understand the totally unique economic model that fueled China's incredible rise. At the very heart of China's system is this fascinating idea called the birdcage economy. Okay, so picture this. The bird represents market forces, private companies, innovation, all that stuff. It's encouraged to fly to create wealth, but, and this is the crucial part, it always flies inside a cage. And that cage is the state, which can make the cage bigger or smaller whenever it wants to guide the bird where the nation needs it to go. And here is exactly what that cage looks like in the real world. Even after decades of opening up its economy, state-owned companies still control 55% of all corporate capital in China. They controlled the most important sectors: finance, energy, communications. It means that, at the end of the day, the state has the final say. And this state direction wasn't just random. It was a very clear, very deliberate plan that's been unfolding for decades. You can literally watch China systematically move its entire economy up the ladder. They went from wanting to build bikes and watches in the 70s to now aiming for complete global dominance in the key technologies that are going to define our future. And right there, that's the core of the issue. China simply refused to play the role it was assigned. As one U.S. senator put it, the whole idea of globalization from the Western point of view was for countries like China to stay at the bottom, making the simpler things. China's success is a direct rejection of that entire playbook. So what you've had for the past 40 years are two totally different paths. While China was all in on a state-led plan to build up its ability to actually make things, the U.S. was deindustrializing. It embraced something called financialization, which basically just means our economy became less about making goods and much, much more about moving money around. And the result is, well, it's pretty striking. The so-called FIRE sector, that's finance, insurance, and real estate, now makes up more than a fifth of the entire U.S. economy. That's more than double the share of actual manufacturing. Just think about that. Our economy is driven more by mortgages and investments than by building cars or computers. The U.S. basically financialized while China industrialized. And remember that cage? Well, having the state control the financial system gives Beijing this incredibly powerful tool that Western countries just don't have. When a real estate bubble started getting too big, the government didn't just cross its fingers and hope for the best. It stepped in, intentionally deflated it, and then redirected all that money away from speculation and straight into high-tech manufacturing. So what's the big payoff after 40 years of this industrial strategy? Well, this is it. Immense strategic leverage. China now processes almost 90% of the world's rare earth minerals. These are the elements that are absolutely essential for everything from your iPhone to a fighter jet. That gives them a huge card to play in any conflict. Which brings us right back to that Pax Silica alliance. The US knows it's vulnerable here, and it's scrambling to build a team to push back. But the billion-dollar question is this: are other countries, especially in the global south, actually willing to pick a side and join Team USA?
Well, the results from that big summit were pretty telling. Over 50 nations came to the meeting, which sounds great. But when it came time to actually sign on the dotted line, only about a dozen actually joined. Major players like Brazil, Mexico, and Pakistan showed up, listened, and then politely said, no thanks. What we're seeing is a new era of non-alignment, where countries would rather focus on their own economies than get dragged into a new Cold War.
At the end of the day, it really all comes back to this. As one really influential tech investor puts it, the main goal of US policy isn't some abstract geopolitical game. It's about making sure that American companies, not Chinese ones, win the race to control the future of the economy. Plain and simple. And so here we are, with this fundamental clash between two profoundly different systems. One is built on state-led industrial planning, the other on market-led finance. And the central question, the one that's going to define our time, is whether these two models can figure out a way to coexist on the same planet, or if this rivalry is just destined to get worse.